Good morning, everyone. I am Dewan Elhern, more affectionately known as the Moon, and this is a different episode of the Moon Equals Wrestling podcast than I originally planned. Well, let's talk about it. So I wanted to. All right, well, let's start off like this. First and foremost, good morning and happy Thanksgiving. This is the Monday before our favorite feast holiday where we celebrate family and food and recognize that nobody is illegal on stolen land. And that's not the podcast political. Let's just say it's being honest. Call it a spade a spade. But this isn't even about that. My original plan for this episode was to just give thanks to like the 3.5 people who actually see this show. But more so to like anyone who supported me, anyone who supports any of my projects, whether you've bought a copy of the Copper Week collection, whether you've watched an episode of Sako and the Moon, whether you are a fan of Moon Equals Wrestling, even if you've just said, "Hey Moon, you're doing great." I appreciate all of that. And I wanted to say from the bottom of my heart, thank you. Thank you very much. And a lot happened this weekend. Not really dense, but a lot happened this weekend. And oddly enough, I'm not talking about the AEW Full Gear pay-per-view. This isn't about that. Exactly. Let me start from the beginning. At some point this weekend, I was on BlueSky. You can follow me there. Just search DL Hearn Writes. And there was a conversation about the TWC. Now, almost all wrestling fans know that TWC is short for the Wrestling Club, which is a club in a school in Brooklyn. It's Kip Amp in Brooklyn, New York. And it was founded by this awesome guy named Victor Perry. I've had a few direct interactions with him casually on Twitter. I follow him on BlueSky. You can follow him at I think Wallflower Named Perry, I think is the name of his handle. Because he's not associated with the club, and I don't want to associate myself with another very popular internet personality, I won't be tagging him. But do go seek out Victor Perry and the Wrestling Club on their Instagram, on their BlueSky, on their Twitter, wherever, and support this group because this is a very special group of young children. They're all middle school kids, so you're looking at ages like 11 to 14, and these kids are special, man. There's a special energy that the Wrestling Club gives off, and they don't even give it. They don't even give off it. They radiate this energy. They exude this energy, and shout out to this guy who just wanted to introduce these kids to this really dope concept of professional wrestling, and these kids have just absolutely taken off with this concept. They're doing all kinds of stuff. Check out their Instagram. Check out this stuff shared by on Twitter. I think Cody Rhodes bought them tickets to WrestleMania. If you heard that story about Cody Rhodes buying tickets for a group of kids to go to WrestleMania, that's them. The reason why I'm even talking about the TWC is because me and this other person, I completely forgot their handle. I forgot to write it down. So my apologies, dude. We were just talking about how special this little corner of the IWC, this corner of the internet wrestling community is, because there's something pure about the love that these children have for professional wrestling. And don't get me wrong, they talked about wrestling, they discussed wrestling. So they're not like uninformed, ignorant fans who don't know the difference between that and reality. No. These are informed fans. These are smart kids, right? And there's still a purity. It's like watching a kid who truly believes in Santa Claus. You know what I mean? It's kind of like that. And it's that purity that really warms my heart. And that's the same kind of vibe that I have as it applies to my thankfulness for anyone who's helped me and supported my show. It's not a word I'm allowed to use often, but I'm greatly humbled by all the love and support. And I'm so thankful for the people who've helped me. And I'm so thankful for the TWC. I have no personal connection with that school or that group or to Victor Perry, but I love the work that he's doing. Victor Perry, if you ever catch this episode, I respect you, man. I love you. I appreciate everything that you're doing for the internet wrestling community, for wrestling as a whole. The TWC, those are some special kids, and whatever you've done, put it in a bottle and sell it to everyone, because I would love for my children to go to a school that has a teacher like you to do these kind of things for them. So great work. And if you haven't got enough flowers yet, here are some more. This past week, they had wrestling visitors, which is something that's becoming pretty common for them. And one of those, well, I should say two of those special guests this week were the AEW World Tag Team Champions, who successfully defended this past Saturday at Full Gear. Zay and Quinn, Private Party. Now, they made a statement at the Media Scrum, which is just their fancy word for press conference post-show. And they talked about their visit that they arranged. It was through them. I'm sure they got approval from Tony Khan, but it was through them because they just wanted to go. And how important it was, because they're from Brooklyn. And I know at least Zay is. I assume they both are, but Zay's from Brooklyn. And Zay was the one talking, and he was talking about how important it was to see kids that look like him loving professional wrestling, and how important it was for them to see wrestlers that look like him. Majority of these children are black. Zay is black. This is contextual. Obviously, the title of the episode is, we'll get there. So, again, like I said, this episode was originally going to be like this long, where I was just going to say thank you to everyone and say happy Thanksgiving and call it a day. And then I saw what Bobby Lashley said. And it was very interesting to me. What he said was, and I don't have a direct quote, so I'm paraphrasing, but someone was asking Bobby Lashley a question because Bobby Lashley had a match against Swerve Strickland, former world champion Swerve Strickland. That's relevant. And he picked up the win against Swerve, and someone referred to Bobby Lashley as a former black champion. And I'm assuming that the question has something to do with inclusion or representation. I'm not really sure what the actual question was, or if that person got a chance to actually finish and asking the question, because I just saw the clip. And normally I go back for context, but what I'm needing to discuss today has nothing to do with the question itself. It had to do with the way the question was initially asked and Bobby's immediate response to that. And Bobby, he looked like he stopped MVP or someone in this direction. He kind of pauses them and says, I don't like that. I don't like black champion, right? And he says, we've normalized black champion. There's no need to specify black champion anymore. You know, we have black champions. We've had, we have black champions, we have Asian champions, we have Latin champions. And we don't need to specify. We've normalized it now. We've normalized it now. And this clip, right, that was spoken by Bobby Lashley, was shared by TNA star, former world champion, multiple-time world champion, Moose. And so that got me thinking, because I initially responded to this saying, I mean, if Bobby Lashley says that we've normalized Black champion and that's being echoed by Moose, who we'd argue, right? I'm really big about representation and making sure that Black voices are heard in spaces where we may not be as vocal or as common or as popular. And I'm a big advocate of that. But then I started to realize that the statement by Zay and the statement by Bobby Lashley almost contradict each other. I mean, not really. There's no real contradiction. They're not like saying opposite things, but they're conveying opposing messages. One person talked about how important it is to be seen as a champion who is Black for the sake of other people to see that, while the other is saying that they've seen Black champions often enough that we no longer need to specify, hey, that's a Black champion, as opposed to just saying, hey, that's a champion. It's like, have we? I mean, for this to be the sentiment of a young champion like Zay versus a veteran of the business like Bobby Lashley and Moose, who echoes the sentiment, have we actually normalized the Black champion? That's my question. And to be honest with you, when I hit record on this podcast, I have not yet decided on whether or not we truly have. I was hoping that I would talk this through on camera and then have a decision by the end of this. So as of this particular moment, we are, according to my counter, 12 minutes and 22 seconds in. I don't know if we have or not. So let's talk about it. Obviously, we have Bobby Lashley, who's a multiple-time WWE World Champion, right? And we are talking about his match against Swerve Strickland, who is a former AEW World Champion. But interestingly enough, Swerve Strickland is the first and only Black World Champion in AEW. Now, this is mostly to the fault of the fact that AEW is only like 5 years old. Like, you got to think about it. AEW is only 5 years old. I want to say, and I would have to go back and check to see exactly, but just for context, for wrestling related context, the entire existence of AEW has fit around Roman Reigns' championship title reign. AEW started in 2019, and I think Roman Reigns became champion during the pandemic, so in 2020, like late 2020. So the majority of AEW's existence, the WWE has had, I'd say, the champion before Roman, and Cody Rhodes. So, if we're not going to get mad at I'm not even going to pose the question. We're not going to get upset that AEW has had one Black World Champion in the time span that WWE has had like 3 champions. Now I'd have to go back. I mean, that's not counting the introduction of the World Heavyweight Championship, or let's see, Roman originally won the Universal Championship, so whoever was WWE champion at the time. So maybe a grand total of 10 world champions in the last 5 years amongst 2 titles. And AEW's had 1 world championship and one black champion. We are not hating on AEW for that. But if you're going to pick a first, Swerve Strickland was a great choice. And I digress to a degree because as the first black champion, that was something that Swerve actually pushed on. He said, I want to be, he said this in the ring on the mic, I want to be the first AEW, the first black AEW champion. This was important to Swerve. And I emphasize this because it was Swerve that Bobby Lashley beat. And as the only black world champion, men's champion at least, that is an important distinction there. And if that was so important for AEW to push and promote and for Swerve to solidify for himself, if that was so important, have we actually normalized the first, have we normalized the black champion? So I thought about this for a second, and I thought that I know, I came with a list. I thought I would list off some of the black champions that we've had in wrestling. So this is AEW, TNA, WWE, across all three brands, that we've had in just recent memory. So within the last year or so, we've had Moose, Swerve Strickland, Mercedes Moné. We've had Willow Nightingale, Bianca Belair, Jade Cargill, Trick Williams, Naomi as Trinity. She was TNA Knockouts champion before Jordynne Grace won it near the beginning of the year. I remember right before the Rumble, Trinity had been champion, lost it to Jordynne Grace right before Trinity came back as Naomi in the Rumble, and Jordynne Grace made her debut for the Rumble. Still a great moment, by the way, and I hope we get more TNA stars, and I hope that over the years we open this invitation, at least to big events like the Rumble, to more wrestling companies. I digress. And then, of course, there's Private Party. And if we want to look at, like, not necessarily black champions, but like non-white champions, you have like Bayley, remember she's Latina, Io Sky, Nia Jax. We have Okada, Roxanne Perez, Damian Priest, and this is not an exclusive list. There are others I'm sure I'm forgetting. But that just kind of goes to show that if Trinity was to win the championship right now, no one would be like, oh, look, a black woman is champion. Bianca Belair and Jade Cargill, outside of just being unapologetically black, they aren't black champions. No one's made a big deal about them being black tag team champions. There have been black tag team champions in WWE's women's division before. Look at Sasha Banks, Mercedes Moné, and Trinity herself, Naomi. They were those champions before the rigmarole. And Raquel Rodriguez, Latina, women's tag team champion. So have we normalized the black champion, or more specifically, the non-white champion in professional wrestling? And the abundance of names on that list from multiple companies over just the span of 2024, at least, because those are champions. I remember holding championship titles this year. For example, Moose was champion right before Nick Nemeth won it. Strickland was champion not too long ago. Mercedes Moné holds 2 titles currently. Bianca Belair and Jade Cargill are champions right now. Trick Williams is champion right now. Private Party, they're champions right now. Nia Jax is champion right now. Okada is champion right now. Roxanne Perez is champion right now. And Damian Priest was the last world heavyweight champion before Gunther. So to have normalized the not white champion seems to be fair. I mean, you look at the overall numbers, there's been like 55, almost 60 different people who have been WWE champion. And I highlight WWE champion, one, because it's the title that's existed the longest in WWE. And the World Heavyweight Championship and the Universal Championship they're not the title with the company's name on it. You know what I mean? I hold it's the Universal Championship was held to me in the same regard as like this TNT Championship. It's another belt. The World Heavyweight Championship is like another belt. But if you really want to put your stamp on somebody, you put the company name on the champion, the WWE champion, the AEW champion, the TNA champion. That's to me important. Otherwise, it sounds like you're just throwing a second world championship out there just for shits and gigs. And that's not to discount champions like Booker T or Mark Henry. But even if you look at champions like Booker T and Mark Henry, the WWE hasn't had that many black world champions. I mean, I think there's maybe a total of 8. If you're looking at like non-white champions, you might get to 50. You might get to 15. And 15 out of 60, that's a quarter. That's a quarter. Quick math. So was it always a thing? No. Is it a thing now? Which is all we can talk about is now. I'd have to say, yeah, it's now become, at the very least, commonplace. It's become commonplace. For Swerve to win that championship, he made a big deal about being the first black champion. And I think if Bobby Lashley was to become champion here soon, I feel like we would make mention that he was the second ever only black, only the second ever black champion in AEW. But I don't think anyone would see it like weird that Bobby Lashley was champion. Bobby Lashley was world champion in WWE. He was world champion in TNA. He will be eventually world champion in AEW because he's Bobby Lashley. You expect that out of a Bobby Lashley character, right? So that's definitely become commonplace because it's happening everywhere. But has it been normalized? Is it commonplace enough that it's been normalized? And I want to distinguish those two terms. To say it's commonplace means it does happen everywhere. It is a common occurrence. To say it's normalized. To say it's normalized, to me, would mean that it's special someone is champion. It's not so much special anymore that they were black and when they were black when they did it. So that would mean that there would be young black children outside of that space who would look at a Randy Orton, a Cody Rhodes, a Hangman Adam Page, look at an MJF, look at a John Moxley and say, he's world champion, I can be world champion. And I'm not 100% sure we're there. And I think the biggest evidence of that might be groups of children like the TWC. Young champions like Zay, who I think is his early 20s, right? And I think when you look at that mirror of Zay looking at the TWC looking at Zay. And, I'll only focus on one side of that, because the way the TWC has embraced wrestling, I don't think that race is a factor. But I'll tell you, their reactions to having Mercedes Moné in the room, Willow Nightingale in the room, Private Party in the room. Do I think that Bayley or Charlotte Flair or Rhea Ripley would get the same reaction? Absolutely. I can just see right now the TWC would go bonkers if Rhea Ripley was to just walk in the room. And, I think that says something about the presentation of wrestling to groups of children like the TWC. Wrestling is being presented as an entity as a whole, and there are elements in it that they can recognize, because this is not an exclusively black school. It's not an exclusively black club. It's not the Black Wrestling Club. It's the wrestling club. It's an inclusive club, and I would assume that anybody anyone from the school could join, and I'm sure they would absolutely welcome any wrestler that showed up that wanted to spend time with those kids. I'm sure they'd be excited to see Kevin Owens. I'm sure they'd be excited to see Sami Zayn. So maybe it has been normalized for them. Maybe the way wrestling's been presented to them as this all-inclusive thing, like form of entertainment, that anyone who has the heart for it can do. And maybe that has a lot to do with it. Maybe the reaction of Zay has more to do with how wrestling was presented to him over the last, we'll call it 15 years, assuming he was like 10 years. I'm assuming ages. So assuming he's like 25, and assuming that he watched wrestling when he was like 10, he would have been a wrestling fan for 15 years. So maybe wrestling was presented to him differently 15 years ago. 15 years ago, we're looking at 2010. WWE is pretty much the only product out there. And you may have seen The Rock, Jinder Mahal, Booker T, Mark Henry. Yeah, as far as like world champions are concerned. So maybe it was different for Zay growing up. I know for me, it was a big deal to see Kofi Kingston win that championship. And I know a lot of people there's that controversial moment where, like, do you count the Rock as a black champion? And we should. A lot of thought went into that, and we absolutely should. He's black and Samoan, and you shouldn't deny any one side of him for the sake of statistics. So, The Rock, it took 1998 for there to be a black champion in WWE, followed by Kofi Kingston, followed by Bobby Lashley, followed by Big E Langston. And now we're sitting here we've had Swerve Strickland, Rich Swann, Moose, and I'm sure there are others, Ron the Truth Killings. Which, side note, if I'm not mistaken, Ron the Truth Killings, R-Truth, as you'll know him today, I think to this day may still be the only black champion in NWA history. I'll have to double check on that. Follow me on BlueSky for verification. If you know for certain, go ahead and put it in the comments here. But yeah, maybe that's it. Maybe it's the way that it's been presented to wrestlers. So when you look at a champion like Zay, seeing a black champion was a rarity for him. So to be a black champion in this new time where we have potentially normalized it and we've at least made it commonplace, maybe that hits differently for him because he thinks back to when he was that middle school age and didn't have that kind of representation. But the TWC, they live in 2024 where that kind of representation is literally everywhere. It is indeed commonplace. So maybe for the TWC and other children like my sons, my daughter, wrestling and having black champion representation is normalized. There is still a video in existence, much to my daughter's dismay, of her dancing and singing to Sasha Banks' theme music because she loves Sasha Banks. And so my daughter got to see a Sasha Banks wrestling. And for a period of time in her youth, she wanted to be a wrestler. And I have to say that she probably wanted to be a wrestler because of Sasha Banks. And no shade to any of the other champions. But Sasha Banks, the one that closest looks like her that she can relate to. Now she's got a Jade Cargill, she's got a Naomi, even a Naomi, a Nia Jax, who has similar hair to my daughter now. And by the way, I love that Nia Jax has her hair like that. I mean, I know it doesn't mean much to anybody else, but Nia's hair looks great. So maybe it has something more to do with that presentation of how we present wrestling. And maybe that's on us as parents, as uncles, as teachers, and how we present information to our children and how they accept it. Maybe accepting and following Victor Perry's example and just presenting wrestling as wrestling. Not white wrestling, not black wrestling, not Asian or Latin wrestling, just wrestling. Then we can look at a wrestling ring and see Jada Parker. We can see a Julia. We can see a Stephanie Vacour. We can see a Roxanne Perez. We can see a Cora Jade. We can see a Sol Ruka. We can see a Kalani Jordan. And we can just see women champions, not necessarily any sort of ethnic tag associated with them. Shout out to the women of NXT. You guys are fucking killing it. I can't sing the praises of the women of NXT enough. They are destroying the game when it comes to women's wrestling. Killing it. Just a quick shout out to Tasha Steeles. We ain't gonna forget about you out there too. And Kira Hogan. There's so many wonderful black champions. And I mentioned them. Chris Bay. This is another champion I wanted to highlight who was champion recently. Chris Bay. But yeah, maybe that's in the presentation. So maybe the fact that today children are seeing wrestling on a broad scale, just wrestling as wrestling. But growing up like myself or growing up maybe like Zay, it was important to see black champions competing for world titles and how, the cultural significance of the New Day cannot be explained. I couldn't do that topic alone. I would have to have a guest. So Don Guillory, if you're out there, the cultural significance of the New Day, that's the topic I want you here for. Total call out. But even that, just to discuss the cultural significance of the New Day, because there is one, and the rivalry between the New Day and the Usos, that was I know the Usos are Samoan, but it's for the culture, man. Their culture, our culture, the culture. The commonplace use of the term Uso or Us to show companionship or brotherhood. Uh, it's for the culture, man. They've made Samoan culture, the bloodline storyline has made Samoan culture commonplace, almost to the point where it's normalized. So Pacific Islanders, so whether it's Samoa or I would say even New Zealand would count. It's a bagillion islands that Pacific Islanders associate collectively, but it's definitely become commonplace when you start looking at where everybody was before they became part of the bloodline story. You know, the Samoans and the Tongans that were in New Japan. Was that Major League? So MLW, Major League Wrestling. I think that's what that is. Where Jacob Fatu was, where Zilla Fatu is. These places. Just this commonplace is showing where these Samoan and Tongan and Pacific Islander, the Asian American Pacific Islander realm of wrestlers are and have been, the scope, the span. We've made that commonplace with storylines as big as the bloodline. Is it normalized? Maybe so. And if it's not, we're almost there. So as I approach the 40-minute mark of this long rant and ramble, I re-asked the question: has wrestling normalized Black champion to such a degree that it's no longer a necessary distinctor, and no longer a necessary tag onto a champion like a Bobby Lashley, like a Swerve Strickland, like a Mercedes Moné, like a Bianca Belair? Not yet. It is 100% commonplace. So I would say commonplace. It's absolutely commonplace. It is no longer, I think, as much of a big deal for a company to put their primary name and back a Black champion. However, I still think it's significant for the youth to see champions that look like them. I think it's still important for my daughters, my sons, to see people in spaces that look like them. In my writing community, there are an increasing number of Black creatives participating in the Imaginarium convention that I go to every year in July here in Louisville. And I remember when I barely saw any in my first year there. And since then, there are several, and there are more every year. And the beautiful thing is, there isn't an initiative to bring in more people of color, at least not by the convention directors. They're not specifically going out and seeking, I don't believe, to my knowledge, but they're showing up. And I know that we're talking about it. People like me are talking about it. We're reaching out and talking to other creatives. I've met some creatives who have heard about it through other Black creatives. And I think that's more of a nod of safety. Like, hey, here's a space where you may not see a lot of people that look like us, but you'll see some, and it's safe to be there, and it's okay. They're welcoming. And you're not going to be just looked at negatively or any of that kind of thing. It's very welcoming. And I think while it's becoming more commonplace, it's not yet been normalized. at my convention. So there is a distinction between being commonplace and normalized. And if I walk in and it feels special to see another Black creative or creative of color, then it hasn't quite been normalized yet. At least not for me. And it is important to note that Bobby Lashley and Moose, two people who have advocated for the distinction of Black champion, kind of be washed away or tossed to the side because it's been normalized. They are veterans. To them, especially having been in those positions, it's probably normal for them because they're the ones that made it normal. They've normalized it. They've normalized it because they're the ones that carved that path out. There weren't that many Black world champions prior to Moose and Bobby Lashley. Like I said, I think the NWA has still only got one on their history books. I'll have to go check. Follow me on BlueSky to find out. And I think that's my answer. I think the only way to properly answer that question is to separate commonplace and normalized. It has absolutely been commonplace. It's not quite normalized. So what do we do about it? Maybe the answer is to stop using it. Maybe the answer actually is to stop specifying Black champions. Maybe the answer is that Kalani Jordan is the first NXT Women's North American champion, but we don't mention her being Black. Maybe if Jada Parker becomes champion, we don't specify the fact that she's Black. Maybe it's the use of Black champion that has prevented from being normalized because we highlight it. So maybe that's the answer. We'll stop using it in interviews. We'll stop using it in podcast videos unless it's a necessary distinction for whatever reason we immediately have. But maybe that is part of the answer, to normalize it by treating Black champions just as champions. I think that's it. This episode's Cheap Plug brought to you by me. If you appreciate this rant, I'd appreciate your support. I'm already thankful that you've actually made it this far into the rant, so appreciate you. If you'd like to support me any further, you can buy really cool stuff at my shop on my site, DwanLHearn.com. You got hats like this. Bam! Got this jacket because this jacket was custom, but there is a hoodie that is now that I got that banner up, you can't see it. There's hoodies that are similar to this. They have the logo on it. I don't even know where it is on my shirt. I think it's backwards. But, you can get the Moon Eagles Wrestling logo on stuff, on hats, on t-shirts, on hoodies. It's a pretty dope logo, I think so. I mean, I made it myself. So feel free, support me on the shop. There's also a link on the homepage of DwanLHearn.com where you can buy my book. And if you go through the YouTube universe and you find the other podcast I'm a part of, the Socko and the Moon podcast, where we talk about horror writing and the sort, we have a Black Friday sale on there. So you can go to Society 6 and look up the artist who's responsible, my co-host, Socko Toomey, and you can find the shop there. I'll have a link for it in the description below, so just go there, check it out. She's got a Black Friday sale set up, so definitely go there and get some really cool Socko and the Moon stuff. Go to DwanLHearn.com/shop, buy some cool Moon Eagles Wrestling stuff. It's dope. That's it, though. That's it. So, yeah, I think it has not yet been normalized. That's my answer. But we're getting there. And I think we know how to do it. And I think it's up to us to make it so commonplace that it is normalized. With that, happy Thanksgiving. Thank you guys for watching. I'll catch you later.